Welcome once again to my channel. Autumn is upon us, and here where I'm living that means rainy days, lots of wind, grey sky, and yellow, orange and red foliage, which is all that I get to enjoy lately because a second wave of the corona epidemic means that I can only afford to wander in the forest near my place. There's no Halloween here, but the iconic autumn vegetable that came from North America is everywhere in supermarkets and grocery stores. So, in this episode, I'll bring to you a Vietnamese recipe featuring the pumpkin, canh khoai môn bí đỏ, taro, and pumpkin soup. I based this dish on a soup recipe from the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, canh khoai mỡ or purple yam soup. Click here for an example of how it's made. So far, I haven't come across purple yam in Germany, so I replaced it with another Asian root vegetable, the taro. I've tried to recreate the taste of home as best as I could, and taro turns out to be a good replacement. For this soup, you'll need taro, and then pumpkin in half of the amount of taro by weight, and some type of bone or meat. If you use meat, I find it's best to use pork mince or chicken mince in, let's say, around half the weight of the pumpkin. Do not use beef or lamb, those are too bold for this dish. Today I'm using chicken mince, and the first thing I would like to do is to brown the meat. This will create more flavor for our soup, and because I would only use around half of this amount of chicken, which comes to about 200 grams, the rest will be stored in the fridge. And browning it would also help it keep much longer there. So I'm going to just let it sit in the very same pot that I would use for the soup later. With a bit of oil, I already put salt and sugar into the oil, and once the meat is in, I give it some fish sauce. The sugar would caramelize and would therefore help the meat brown more quickly. Sugar and proteins would also react with one another at high temperature and create a bunch of chemical compounds that give a more complex flavor to the soup. This is called the Maillard reaction, and I do it a lot in my cooking. That's it, no water needed. Let it cook on medium heat with the lid on. We'll check on this periodically while preparing the other ingredients. As I said before, this recipe was originally intended for khoai mỡ or purple yam, which is a root grown all over Southeast Asia. It's thought to have come from the island of New Guinea. This plant doesn't seem to have made its way to Germany yet. What I do find though is this guy, taro, in Vietnamese khoai môn. This is another tuber which also came from the Pacific Islands and is also cultivated in tropical Asia, but for some reason it's much more famous and widespread, and you can find it virtually in all Asian shops and supermarkets here. As you can probably see from the scientific names, these two don't even come from the same family of plant, and they taste different indeed. By switching one for another, I'm essentially cooking a different dish. But I have to work with what I've got, and in my opinion, it does work out quite well. Being an imported tropical product itself, fresh taro doesn't come super cheap here. 1 kilogram cost me €4.50, and this amount here is about 1.1 kilo or €5. Luckily, as a root vegetable, it does keep quite well in a dark, dry place. If you need to store it, you can also buy it frozen, which is probably cheaper but doesn't taste as good. For the second main ingredient, pumpkin, I have some butternut pumpkin already prepared and sitting in the fridge. Thankfully, this is leftover ingredient from another meal, but it's still quite a lot, almost 400 grams. So because taro should be roughly twice in weight compared to pumpkin, I would use about 700 grams of taro. These two tubers here should do the job. After rinsing the tubers under the tap, we can peel them. This is the most messy and time-consuming step for today. Even after peeling the earthy outer layer away, you can still see a lot of black spots on the surface of the roots. We have to peel until those spots are gone, and also carve away any area that is damaged or diseased. After that, the taro can be chopped roughly into cubes like this. taro is very starchy, and you can see all of that white starch it left on the cutting board, which of course had to be cleaned up in the end. All of this is a bit too much work for me, and that's why I only cook this dish once in a blue moon. Now let's check back on the mince. Much water has evaporated and condensed on the lid of the pan, and the meat is much drier and browner now. There's a layer of slightly burnt protein and sugar sticking to the bottom of the pot. This is excellent. That's a lot of flavor right there. So let's keep it going like this on low heat until we're ready. At this point, I would like to introduce you to the magic ingredient of this recipe, a herb that makes the dish, rau ngò om, called the rice paddy herb in English, or amusingly in German, aromatischer Sumpfreund, or aromatic swamp friend. This is an aquatic or semi-aquatic plant with a unique fragrance. Nothing is like it, and Vietnamese cuisine is actually one of the very few cuisines that use this herb. So you would have the most luck searching for it in a Vietnamese shop. Here it is, sold in these €2 packages. The label spelling out the Thai name of the herb, Pakayang, and also the scientific name. I highly recommend that you don't try out this recipe until you have gotten your hands on this herb. Seriously, it's a game changer. And here's how they look like. Out of the bag, I will strip away the leaves and try to root the stalks in water. I just learned that some people grow this as an aquarium or fish tank plant, so I would like to try my luck. If you have no need for that, just simply chop them up, stalks and leaves alike. Here's the leaves, and here's the stalks sitting in water. I'll put a plastic bag around them to keep moisture in. Let's see if I'll get anything out of these. Next, chop up the parts that you want to use into small pieces. In my case, only the leaves. To make your chopping more effective, put some energy into it by pretending for 1 second that cooking will actually solve any of your life problems and make your growing sense of isolation disappear. Our chicken mince is on point now. Brown, dry and delicious. I've put roughly 200 grams or half of it away, and I'm using the other half for the soup. Here I also have some garlic slices. Onion and garlic are optional. They make for a richer flavor of the soup, but they are not essential. I'll give it some more salt too, because we're about to add quite a lot of water into this. The pot that I'm using is actually a simple pressure cooker. This should speed things up quite a bit today. Now we add in the taro and cook it first, because it takes a longer cooking time compared to the pumpkin. Add about half a liter of water for now. I'll seal the lid of the pressure cooker, and I'll give this about 10 minutes of cooking on medium heat. If you're not using a pressure cooker, just double that amount of time. That means about 20 minutes. I would still recommend medium heat for whatever type of pot you're using, because slow and steady will give us a better result here. Pressure cookers, they're great at saving you time and money. After that first cooking step is done, the taro should look like this. Nice and soft. You can see that it has released quite a lot of the starch into the water already. At this point, we can add a bit more seasoning like pepper, hot chili, perhaps a bit more sugar, or some chicken soup powder with MSG. You just have to taste it and see what's still lacking for you. Alright, now the pumpkin goes in. Let's give it about 250 milliliters of water more and mix everything. This should give us somewhere around the ballpark of 1 liter of soup in total. I'll give it around 7 to 8 minutes in my pressure cooker. That's about 15 minutes of simmering for a normal pot. After that second round of simmering, our soup is basically done. Here at the last moment, while the soup is still very hot, we will introduce our magic herb into the soup. I'll give it a stir, and voila! Our taro pumpkin soup is finished. Starchy and thick, with an orange tint from the pumpkin. This soup doesn't look very exciting in photos because it has the appearance of baby food, but you just have to try it for yourself. Combining taro, pumpkin, caramelized meat, and the rice paddy herb creates a flavor profile like no other. This is one of my favorite sick day foods growing up. My mom made this soup for me a lot of times when I came down with the seasonal flu. And my favorite thing to do is to pour it over rice. Like this. Simply wonderful. So, if you want a pumpkin related recipe for your autumn, that's one idea from Vietnam. Good appetit!